in order to put the customer first, you have to be the person they talk to at all times. We noticed that with a lot of other products, there was one organization selling you the policy, another organization that you'd need to contact if you had a problem. There was a third one if you needed to file a claim, and there was just no consistency. And everyone was motivated by different aspects of it. So really the fundamental insight was first and foremost that if you put the customer first and if you made it that you were legally and practically allowed to handle every single part of the customer's journey with you, it was much easier to create a meaningful and memorable experience for them.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Today, we're talking about travel insurance. From an unlikely upbringing, Faye is such an interesting company from the Israeli ecosystem, and this conversation with Daniel Green is all about the formation of Faye, how they figured what they need to be building, the responses they've been getting, and what they've been learning. Daniel Green is co-founder and CTO of Faye, the #1 disruptor setting a new standard in travel insurance coverage and care. This is the second startup he has founded with Faye co-founder and CEO Elad Schaffer. Both previously co-founded Wikistrat, the world's first crowdsourced consultancy platform. There, Daniel developed the company's core technologies, including a real-time collaboration platform, gamification and incentification systems, and its flagship data model for predicting disruptions to countries and economies. As a developer with 20 years of experience and a deep passion for travel, Daniel enjoys applying his specialization in real-time applications to Faye's core mission of forever elevating the way consumers travel. Dan Green, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm awesome.
I'm really excited to pick your brain on these awesome things you're working on in the travel insurance space. Travel is such a big topic over the last few years, ups and downs, but obviously something that we all enjoy taking part in, and it's a great privilege. And right before we start talking about what you're doing today, I have to hear the story about predicting flight delays and what happened there, because it sounds, first of all, it sounds awesome, but it also sounds a little bit connected to what you're working on.
Sure. So I've been lucky enough to be traveling a lot in my lifetime. I started by working in theater, and I was traveling between two cities, and then moved to Israel, started a company with my current CEO. So we've been co-founders for like 12 years, and we were having to travel all the time to meet clients. And at some point, it got to the point where I was traveling overseas multiple times, sometimes in a week. And you just started to pick up these little intuitions about what was making flights work and not work. You started having long layovers. You talk to people at the airport. I like chatting to people on the plane, and you just start to learn that there's this whole crazy ecosystem of travel. There's this universe of gamification that they use for their frequent flyer programs. And at some point, it got to the point where I was able to get on a plane once in a while, ask the crew what the consequences would be of a delay, and they would say, "What delay?" And it would turn out I was right.
Awesome. And one of those times they actually rewarded you for picking up on that, right?
Yeah, the pilot was impressed enough that came out after we were in the air to ask how I guessed it before anyone else did, and I explained what my intuition was and what I read in the radar report. And I was going to miss a connection on a flight to New Jersey. I really wanted to meet. I had a new niece that I really wanted to see, and so what they ended up doing was, because I'd become friends with the pilot, he'd put a call into the ground. So when we landed at Heathrow, someone met me at the door with a car, drove me across the tarmac. We got to the X-ray machine for the second flight. They said, "If there's a bottle of water in this bag, you are not going to make it." We made it to the flight. They closed the door behind me. And after we took off, someone actually came up and asked who I was, assuming I was a celebrity. I think that held the flight for about 10 minutes so I could make it. And I wrote a few thank you letters after that. And I used to be known around the airport that they actually had the photograph of me and the niece hanging up hanging up somewhere in the airport. So I'd walk into the airport, they'd recognize me as well. It's a really fun world to be part of.
I love it. I love it. Okay, tell me a little bit about travel insurance and everything in between. What is sort of the underlying understanding that you and your co-founder had when starting this company?
Sure. So we didn't start by doing travel insurance. We started with the insight that when things go wrong when you're traveling, what matters the most is having information available to you faster than everyone else. So if there's 5 seats left on the next plane, the first 5 people to know that are the most likely to get out of town. And sometimes you could land at an airport where if you miss the train between terminals, you're not going to make it. But if you knew that there's a service passage that anyone can walk down, you've still got a shot at making that flight. And you just need that information exactly when you need it. So we started off as a smart travel assistant. We launched in the very end of 2019, really January 2020. So you know where the punchline of this is going. And just as we were really taking off, people were signing up for the travel assistant on a daily basis. Suddenly COVID hit, and we still had people continue to use us, and we were collecting amazing stories from people who were traveling with our smart assistant that we nicknamed Zenny at the time because it made you more zen. And we really understood that the missing piece of what we were doing was it's all well and good to have the inside information. It's all well and good to know in advance that there's a prediction that something will go wrong with your flight, but what's next? And really for us, the missing piece was insurance. So that was the birth of Faye as you know it today. And we really understood that so many people saw insurance as a reimbursement service, something that they dealt with only when they got home. And we really wanted to change that. We really wanted it to be something you used even if something didn't go wrong on your trip. And that was why we became about creating a consumer-centric smart offering that was top coverage, 24/7 assistance, no excessive paperwork, real-time alerts, like everything you need to make your trip a success, not just a reimbursement service when things go wrong.
What did you figure out about creating sort of this trust with the consumers? You're mentioning that you have to there's a consumer behavior shift here from thinking about insurance companies as sort of this reimbursatory type mechanism to actually a companion on travel. What steps did you have to do that you found were most helpful in creating that distinction?
So I think for us, the single biggest thing we did from a company point of view is that we actually built the ability to handle claims, which from a legal and regulatory point of view is an incredibly complicated undertaking. But we really started with this philosophy that in order to put the customer first, you have to be the person they talk to at all times. We noticed that with a lot of other products, there was one organization selling you the policy, another organization that you'd need to contact if you had a problem. There was a third one if you needed to file a claim, and there was just no consistency. And everyone was motivated by different aspects of it. So really the fundamental insight was first and foremost that if you put the customer first and if you made it that you were legally and practically allowed to handle every single part of the customer's journey with you, it was much easier to create a meaningful and memorable experience for them. And you were only motivated by making the customer as comfortable as you can and looking after them as best you can. And you're not worried about, someone else down the chain. You're not United Airlines selling a policy on behalf of another company or a clearinghouse for claims working on behalf of an insurance carrier.
And obviously you're the chief technology officer here. So tell me a little bit about the technology that goes into perhaps automating a lot of this personalized experience, because then as you scale, you need to be able to offer that to a lot of people in real time and create that trust.
Sure. So there's 2 parts to it. There's actually when you go to buy a product and then when you need to interact with us afterwards. So one of the things that people got very used to is the idea that you would enter dozens of pieces of information when buying a policy, and then you'd be shown 3 or 4 different plans to choose from or different carriers. Then maybe there'd be a bronze, silver, gold version of the plan. And so we actually made the decision to make you just one offer. We ask you 5 or 6 questions about your trip. We look into all the information that we might be able to gather about other people that have had similar itineraries. We understand that someone traveling to London is not necessarily the same as someone traveling to Madrid, which is not the same as someone traveling to Ibiza, even though sometimes the insurance is rated the same. So we don't ask you to choose from plans. We present what we believe is the best coverage for your needs. We don't let you buy coverage you can't use. So for example, cancel for any reason can't be used within 48 hours of your trip. So if you're traveling in 36 hours, we won't even offer it to you. The only things you can toggle is, are you traveling with your pet and are you hiring a car? And so that means that you can go from opening our website to being covered by us in less than a minute, so long as you know your trip dates, and we just took all the thinking and questioning out of it. If you don't like what we're offering, it's okay. You can go with other companies, but we've offered you what we think is the best and most appropriate package. And then the second part,
No, go ahead.
And then the second part is what happens after that. So we offer you instantly a mobile app to download. We ask you to enter your flight information and other bits of your booking so that we can start to send you alerts in advance. We know there's an earthquake in that area. We know in advance that your flight's going to be delayed. We'll even tell you that you're entitled to a compensation for, let's say, a delayed flight or a missed connection before you need to reach out to us when you have a claim. And we're able to process some of that information instantly using computer vision and the like, all the way through to actually pushing a credit card through to your phone. So if you need to pay for something in trip, so long as it's approved and it falls in the right categories, we can actually issue you an Apple Pay or a Google Pay card on the spot for you to use before you even get home.
Interesting. And so obviously still people go to the website, they have to choose between getting your services versus a lot of the incumbents that while maybe there's, they're more on the reimbursory type of mindset, there's still, there's larger players that have long sustaining brands. Was it trivial to get people to buy into this and say, yeah, we trust that Faye will be here when we need them, besides the great brand and the great messaging? How do you get them to actually believe that you are going to be there for them up to, pre-purchasing? How do you get them to actually go ahead and choose you over others?
So firstly, I think COVID was not just a massive accelerator for people wanting travel insurance in the first place, but it was the event where a lot of people had really bad experiences with their existing travel insurance. Maybe they thought that their credit card would cover something and they didn't realize it wasn't. Maybe they thought they were covered for the entirety of their trip, but they were only covered up to a few $100 or a few $1,000s. So I do think one of the advantages we have at the moment is we're not one of the incumbents. There are a lot of people that had bad experiences with the major brands during COVID, and they're looking for a new player that's promising to make a difference. And I think that's a really significant part of what leads people to trust us. And I think the other part is we've worked really hard to create a friendly, welcoming brand. I think most travel insurance products look very corporate, very generic. They have stock images. They all follow a very similar format. And there's a lot of people that even coming to the homepage of the website already feel like, okay, this is different to the incumbents. Let's give these guys a try.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit about your own personal journey. You mentioned that you've been traveling a lot, and you obviously seem really excited about what you're doing here. But what role does this play sort of in your own personal journey, in your own life?
So I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and there's everyone who grew up on an island. I guess a little bit like people who live in places like Israel. There's a huge desire to get out and travel. So even growing up, travel was kind of part of the ethos of being Australian. I was lucky enough to work in the entertainment industry. I did real-time programming for film, theater, and television, which led to all sorts of interesting adventures. And that in itself allowed for a little bit of travel. I've been lucky enough to interact with computers back in the days where they were black and green screens. You really had to tell it step by step. In fact, I think the first thing I used to save things on was audio cassettes. You could use them as disk drives back in the 80s. And so part of that became a passion for real-time programming. When you work in theater, if something goes wrong, you have literally minutes to fix it before people in the audience will start to complain. And sometimes there's even an SLA that once you've ruined about 6-7 minutes of a show, people can start to ask for refunds. And there's an amazing culture that comes from all of that.
Wow.
And then about 12 years ago, moved to Israel, started a company with my then and still current CEO. And we were building crowdsourcing systems for governments and governments, large corporations, a lot of them that wanted to meet in person, even though we were a remote company before remote was a thing. They really liked to meet in person, see that you were real. And so we found ourselves on the front end building this amazing expert network crowdsourcing platform. And then on the back end, running a travel agency as we were getting everyone in and out. And there was this real feeling you'd get a phone call. You might be sitting in London having a meeting and someone would call you in DC and say, hey, I've got a great idea. Can we meet? And say, sure, let's meet next week. And they'd say, let's meet tomorrow. And you'd figure it out. And then inevitably you'd miss a connection somewhere in New York at 2 a.m. and you had to figure that part out as well. So I've always been fascinated by the systems that underpin the way the world works. So travel was a big fun part of that. Especially if you get into the nice bridge between the psychology of travel, which is everything from how people feel like when they travel to the frequent flyer programs and the incredible world of gamification that underlines, how we can get you to stay super loyal to one airline for the vague possibility that you'll get to board 3 minutes earlier than everyone else. And as you kind of go up the ladders of traveling, you also get to experience that. You start getting greeted on planes, you start getting greeted at airports, and you get the occasional upgrade. And all of that really gets you to think about the algorithms and systems and data that goes into airlines, making those decisions as well. And so I've always worked in sort of data heavy real time situations. And travel insurance is kind of the ultimate culmination of that. We get scenarios now where people sometimes call into the support center at the gate as their flight is boarding with a problem. And they're asking us not just, can we fix it, but can we fix it in the 6 minutes before they close the door?
Wow. And so tell me a little bit about, your role as Chief Technology Officer and sort of how you see technology playing a role here, because obviously you're so passionate, excited about what you're doing, and you're talking a lot about the psychology of it and the trust in the brand. How do you see the technology being a part of it? And what is sort of your role as a technology leader in making that happen?
Sure. So I'll break it into 2 sections. So the most obvious side is when it comes to insurance, there is the entire world of actuarial science and maths that's known as underwriting. And travel insurance has traditionally been a bit of a less sophisticated product. A lot of them just don't differentiate between what airline you're flying, where you're going to, what class you're flying. And so part of that is understanding, can we start to collect and map and model the data today that will allow us to eventually approach a regulator in places like the US and have much more sophisticated underwriting and pricing, and really just optimize. At the end of the day, the whole concept of insurance is we all put $10 into a pot with the agreement that if everything goes perfectly well, our $10 went to pay for someone else's misfortune. And I think a lot of people forget that. And then the second part is, how can you scale customer experience?
Right.
And how can you, it's one thing to take a phone call from someone at the gate who wants you to troubleshoot, but when it is the sort of claim-ageddon, as some people are calling it right now, with just how many things that are going wrong, you don't want to be manually processing everyone's baggage forms. Can people take photographs? Can you take a GPS location? What are all the things you can kind of automatically collect in advance so that you can still comply with all the regulation that comes with insurance, that you can still get the paperwork prepared on the back end without the customer having to suffer through those processes? I mean, the number of insurance products that require you to write out your name, email address, and policy number on 6 different pieces of paperwork when the company that sold you the policy has known that from the beginning. So it's been a really interesting challenge to build the team here in Tel Aviv and a few other places of people that are super passionate about travel and are really thinking about how we can digitize common sense so that computers can make quick, smart, and legally compliant decisions wherever possible. And the rest of the time, it can just prepare something for a human to just sort of be in the loop, tick off that it works, and then only deal with the more complicated personal stuff.
Awesome. And so what do you think is going to really make Faye win at the end? What is sort of this underlying strategy that you're saying, this is why I think Faye is going to be a market leader in the travel companionship insurance space?
So I think we're already seeing some of that now. I mean, we've only been in the market for 4 months and we have people returning for their second and third trip with us, which is incredible. And I know it's not a technology answer, but I really believe that concept of caring about the customer as a philosophy has so many amazing side effects or consequences for the company. It means that people tell their friends. It means that people come back. In America, most people really think about trip and travel insurance as something they buy on a case-by-case basis. They have no loyalty. They don't remember who they worked with the previous time. Maybe they just ticked a box when they were buying their flight. So I think having a brand, having people know your name and care about you is really what causes people not to think I need travel insurance, but to think I'm traveling. I better check that I've got a policy or a plan set up with Faye. And I even see it now that people sometimes write in with a claim and the response that comes from the claim team doesn't start with, "Dear sir," it starts with, "Oh no, that's terrible. Can you tell me more about what happened?" Which is a completely new experience for the customer and leads them to say, we've had people who we've denied claims and they've still said, "Wow, just thanks for caring. And I understand it didn't fit in with the policy." And we've had people where we've approved claims and they've said, "Just so you know, the airlines just paid me back. So I'd like to cancel the claim because you guys were so nice and so powerful in the way you treated me as a human that I don't want to double dip." And I can't imagine that happens with a lot of other companies.
Right. I think that we saw a lot of it, specifically from personal experiences, with like Walt's customer service. I remember that was a big change in sort of a disruption of how you treat, a lot of these mishaps. And I remember the sort of working with emojis and the "oh no" type of mindset. I think it's just, that's where we're heading, and that's what people look for. People want to be heard ultimately beyond just the claim. And it sounds like you're working on some really, really fascinating things. And I look forward to using Faye myself. And thank you very much for joining me for these 20 minutes, sharing your own story, sharing the story of Faye and what you've learned. And I'm looking forward to cheering from the side. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.